Welcome to the Eternal Conversations podcast. So, today I'm going to talk about a paper I wrote my first semester as a graduate student in philosophy. I was taking a course in existentialism and phenomenology, particularly researching Heidegger's book Being and Time. That semester I also visited graveyards, one in particular where caskets and skulls were loose among the grounds were found everywhere. I was horrified, was able to see face to face the fate of us all, and it helped me understand. Gurdjieff once wrote, "The greatest thing that one can realize is that you and everyone around you will soon be dead." This may sound gloomy, but can force one to realize that one must live before he dies, to maximize his or her potential during this brief blip of consciousness, during this fast-paced realization of one's true nature, hopefully before one transforms into the next dimension. Anxiety is a byproduct of this being aliveness, and is also heavily discussed in this paper. Lovely topics, I know, but are very realistic expressions of human existence. So, I will now read my paper, entitled Anxiety, Pain, Suffering, and Death Through the Works of Heidegger. Hope you enjoy it. The everyday mode of existence is inauthentic and is marked by gossip, curiosity, and ambiguity. It is second-hand and superficial since it relies on hearsay. This inauthentic mode is the downfall of Dasein. Dasein surrenders to the world. It would, however, be a mistake to interpret the downfall of Dasein as degeneration, as the dark side of existence. In Heidegger's view, this mode is proof of the existentiality of existence, for Dasein is still being in the world, however inauthentically. What brings Dasein before the that is of its there, which stares it in the face with the inexorability of an enigma, or moods. These moods do not show the when and where of existence, but only its being thrown to the there. To be in a certain mood is to view the world in a certain way, which crucially affects our engagement with the world, and with the ways in which we respond to entities within it. Moods are different from emotions because emotions are always directed at particular entities, whereas moods are not, leading to little or no control of them. More specifically, as Heidegger meant it, to be in a certain mood is to be attuned in a certain way. Moods are the metaphorical goggles to which one is affixed, coloring, blurring, or sharpening the world as it appears. The fundamental mood for Dasein is anxiety, which is produced by nothingness, which in turn reveals the ground under which Dasein is determined. Anxiety is closely related to the phenomenon of downfall, which involves dissolution in the world and in others, the they who are expressive of the fallen state of mankind in general and of those who are unwilling to face death. This dissolution reveals the source of Dasein's flight from himself, from the possibility of being one's true self. The what Dasein flees from is existence itself. Because as something threatening, it must provoke anxiety. In common usage, anxiety and fear are interchangeable. But for Heidegger, fear concerns beings in the world, and is inauthentic in that this fear has surrendered to the world. The sign can only be afraid of something, but anxiety is a fear of no thing. It simply is, as he says. The object of anxiety, however, is being in the world as such. It is wholly indeterminate. It is already there, and yet nowhere. It is so close that it is oppressive and stifles one's breath, and yet it is nowhere. Once anxiety is gone, we say that it was really nothing. But, for Heidegger, anxiety plays its greatest role in being in the world as being towards death. The role it plays in Dasein is in Dasein himself. It is constitutive of Dasein himself, and therefore is not psychological. As long as Dasein is, there is being. This is not to be understood in the sense of subjectivism or idealism. Heidegger does not deny the reality of the external world, nor does he want to say that being is the product of man, or that it can be derived from being qua Dasein. It is instead both Sein and Dasein. Being and human existence are intertwined. Man is intimately bound up with the downfalling nullity of the world. Being and nothingness cannot be separated, because being is in nothingness, as it were in its veil. Nothingness, before which anxiety brings us, reveals the nullity of human existence, whose essential trait is being thrown into death. The sign can never be in its entirety until death. This interpretation does not include what the sign can be, or what he becomes. What he indeed becomes is the end itself, death, which comprises the totality of his existence. But it is not possible for Dasein to experience not existing anymore, or to experience death as such. When Dasein reaches its wholeness in death, it simultaneously loses the being of its there. By transition to no longer Dasein, it gets lifted right out of the possibility of experiencing this transition and of understanding it as something experienced. Sorry about that. Candle went out. The experience of the death of others cannot serve as a substitute for it. Just as the sign is specifically mine, so is dying. One can die for someone, but no one can relieve another from his dying. Death is more than a negation of the sign, because it permeates him, and because the sign dies insofar as he exists. Death is impending. The sign lives with death. As long as he is always his not yet. He never reaches his end. But the end here is not a coming to an end of the sign, but a being towards the end. Death is the mode of being, which the sign takes upon itself, as soon as a human being is alive, he is old enough to die. In a wider sense, death is the phenomenon of life. For Heidegger, dying is a mode of being in which Dasein is towards its death. Death differs from demise. For Heidegger, death is a dying in the verbal sense, which is something that all living creatures do. Every creature is a second closer. Every second is a second closer to one's death. But demise is at the end of that dying. It is the exact moment of finitude or termination of existence. Demise is not a constitutive element of the sign's being. What is important in this existential interpretation of death is that it precedes all biology and ontology of life. According to Heidegger, it alone gives a basis to a historical, biographical, and ethnological, psychological investigation of death, a typology of dying, as a characterization of the states and ways in which this demise is being experienced, already presupposes the concept of death. Furthermore, a psychology of dying gives information about the life of those who are about to die, rather than just about dying itself. This is because Dasein does not actually die when experiencing the factual demise. Also, the ontologic analysis of being towards death does not decide anything about whether after death, a different, a higher, or a lower existence is possible. Heidegger avoids the question about the possibility of the beyond, and holds that one cannot meaningfully ask what is after death. It is even an open question whether such inquiry is at all theoretically possible, because the answer to this could never be told after Dasein is severed from being with others. Dasein is comprised of that which awaits him, with the possibilities which are yet to come. This may be deciding to drive across the country, build a home, or visit a friend. But death is not forthcoming as such. It is distinguished from other kinds of possibilities by three characteristics. It is private. It is an unrelated possibility. Insofar as in death, the relations to all other Daseins are dissolved. And it is an unsurpassable possibility, insofar as it represents the most extreme possibility, which is the possibility of the absolute impossibility of Dasein. As soon as Dasein is, he is also already thrown into this possibility. If, however, this being towards death essentially and originally belongs to Dasein, then it must also be found in everydayness. The self of everydayness is Das Man, who knows death as an everyday occurrence. It knows that everyone dies someday, but does not feel concerned or threatened. Those who die always signify everybody but me. Thus dying is brought down to the level of an event that does not affect me. This camouflaging of death, this dodging of the thought of death, stubbornly dominates everydayness. It goes so far that thinking about death is cowardly fear and somber flight from the world. Such superior indifferences to death, however, alienates Dasein from its genuine possibility of being. This estrangement of Dasein, this constant flight from death, is possibly only because the certainty of death goes hand in hand with the uncertainty of when. But Dasein is already given over to death. It dies constantly. And in authentic existence, death is the highest degree probable, but not really certain. It is merely an empirical certainty, which is less than the apodictic certainty attainable in some sectors of theoretical knowledge. But in the authentic being towards death, the possibility of death is uncompromisable, understood as the possibility of the impossible existence. As such a possibility, death is the most specific, extreme possibility in which Dasein is already always running ahead of itself. In this running ahead of itself towards death, Dasein opens itself to the threat of absolute responsibility, which is the responsibility of making moments intense and full, of separating every moment into the essential and the inessential, the genuine from the false. It is this being thrown into death which reveals itself to Dasein in the phenomenon of anxiety. The revelation of this constant threat takes place through anxiety, as being towards death is essential anxiety. In it, this is where Dasein finds himself before nothingness. and before the possible impossibility of his existence. Anxiety and nothingness bring the sign before the possibility in order to be itself. The anxiety-filled creature resolutely takes death upon itself, and anxiety-ridden freedom to death. This is accomplished by realizing that existence must be given meaning, since it does not possess it. This resolve is not an escape, invented for the purpose of overcoming death, but is an illusionless confrontation of death. With such sobersome anxiety comes the armed joyness at the possibility of the impossibility of existence. The sign becomes free from the crutches that the inauthentic way of life draws from the world. The authentic being towards death arouses him and destines him to create his own life as much as he possibly can. It is similar to the old precept, in order to live, one had to die. But this occurs only after one becomes aware of the essential finitude of existence. In the end, Heidegger does not give a direct answer to death, but merely summons man to change his life, to live authentically while still alive. It is only in the realization of our existence as essentially and necessarily being towards death that man can rise above the petty day-to-day life of everydayness to truly become himself and be free. So that's it. That's the paper on Heidegger, anxiety, and death. And I hope you enjoyed it. Check out the links to my books down below if you want more information. Check out eternalconversations.com, the Eternal Conversations podcast, and peace, love, and light.